Very warm good evening to all. The first topic we will discuss today is about public interest litigation. Public interest litigation itself depicts that it is about the public interest and a litigation which is related to public interest. Now, public interest is something which has a very wider meaning, but if you look into the law books, you will never find that there is a definition of public interest litigation. That is, in short, we call it PIL. So you rarely find that PIL is defined. It's a kind of judicial activism which the a device which a court has developed, where by which the court is coming into the picture and I would say creating a law, or in place of law and guidelines, or in the form of direction through which uh, they can help the people of this country. We can go back to the Bhavri Devi's case. If you have read in your curricular this study when you were doing law, you must have heard about the Bhavri Devi's case. She was a Sathin. She was in a Anganwadi Sevika type, what we have in Maharashtra. And her job was to stop Bal Vivaha, child marriages. Now, when she was in the working tenure that in Rajasthan, a 9 months baby's marriage was fixed. And what she did, she called the police and somehow stopped this. And this enraged the people there, and the 5 people raped her. And when she went to the police station, nobody was ready to uh, take her complaint and FIR, though she was raped. Her husband was also beaten up. Now, this incident came in a newspaper, in a very small newspaper. From there, it came to the bigger newspaper on the TV channel. And what happened? That there were not many channels that time, but it came into on the news, and in the whole country there was this agitation against it. How come that one lady is raped and the police is not ready to take the FIR? And in the on left, right, completely in whole country there were PL files, and many of the PL, that is public interest litigation, were filed in the Supreme Court. One lady lawyer, Naina Kapoor, she filed a PIL in the Supreme Court that an FIR should be lodged and a lot of things. Now, what happened in Bhavri Devi's case? Vishaka guidelines were laid down because there were many these NGOs who filed the public interest litigation. And through this public interest litigation, Bhavri Devi ultimately got justice. And what happened through this? Law was laid down for a working woman, because one point which the judges took out in the Supreme Court, that is about that when a lady who is working on behalf of government, she was trying to stop the child marriage. She was actually working at the workplace, and if she is working, it is the responsibility of state government or the central government to take care of her. And through this, Vishaka guidelines came, and through Vishaka guidelines, we came to know that though there was not law for the working ladies, it let down that working ladies has to be protected, and there were many guidelines in Vishaka guidelines. Now, of course, Vishaka guidelines is only of an academic nature. Now we have a law laid down by the parliament for the women, that the women at the workplace will be protected. But there was no law. Now, another example I can give you is the Parman Katara's case. Now, this Parman Katara was a social worker. He read one news item in the newspaper where it was said that one scooterist died because no hospital was ready to admit him, and because he was not given first aid treatment on the right time, he died because it was a police case. Now this Parman Katara got disturbed by this, and he came before the Supreme Court. Now when he came before the Supreme Court, he said that if this kind of accidents happens and people lose life, FIR can be filed later on. The procedure of the police can take place later on. But the person who dies, he can never be brought back. So Supreme Court let down the guidelines in the accident cases whenever it happens, that the hospital first should admit and they should never insist on the police report. The first First, they have to treat the patients and try to save him. And the hospitals has the bounden duty to look after the person who has been brought to the hospital. Now, this is very important because we see so many accidents, and they say first go to the police station. No, this Supreme Court case, Parman Katara's case, says that it has the hospital's first duty is to take care of that person, and then later on report to the police station. So this is also very important. So it is a kind of judicial activism which you will not find in the law books, but you will find in judgments. There is also one more judgment, very important, Vishaljit. Now, Vishaljit was a lawyer who was disturbed by these young girls brought into the prostitution racket. Now, these girls were brought from the poor areas and they were sold in the market for the maybe bonded labor or for the slavery, or maybe also for a forceful sexual offenses, and also for the commercial exploitation sexually. Now, what happened? Vishaljit, being disturbed by all this, he brought this matter in the eyes of the Supreme Court by way of PIL. Now, Supreme Court put an advisory committee also this, and also put a guidelines that this kind of immoral traffic should not be allowed, and the state government should take up the responsibility, and they should see that these girls are taken care. So there were also guidelines in this matter. So PIL is something which is about the social interest, social justice. It cannot be for the publicity purpose. It cannot be for the personal vendetta. See, if I am not happy with my MLA here or MP here, and if I go file in the PIL, it will be dismissed and I may be put to the cause. So always remember that public interest litigation is always about the some social interest, public interest, for not for myself. You cannot file a petition because one garden is not looked after properly by the BMC, by the Mahanagar Palika, not something like that. It should be genuine, and it should have something which is at the core of the public good. If it is not for public good, it is not going to be successful. So whenever I have read one judgment where it was said that PIL should be, you should come, whenever you are filing PIL, you should come to the court with clean hand, clean mind, clean object, and also clean heart. See the words used. Even our heart should be clean when you are filing PIL. So the object should be clean. It should not be just because we want to file it, we have to file out to get the publicity. You must have heard that River Ganga, about River Ganga. There was lot of pollution, and in Kanpur there was this business of chamda business we call. वहाँ पर बहुत सारी चमड़े की चीजें बनती है. Those who are from UP, they know Kanpur is a big hub. Now here for the leather business, there was a lot of pollution because of this. Ganga river was polluted. Now when Mr. MC Mehta, it brought to the, he was a businessman, he was disturbed by all this, and he brought this to notice of the Supreme Court. And when a PIL was filed, what happened? Supreme Court said that this business has to be closed down, and the Ganga river should be clean. And this is how it was done. So the PIL is a tool in our hands to do social justice. One very important case I would like to discuss is about the Sunil Batra's case. Sunil Batra was a prisoner. Now he was a prisoner in a jail, and he was convicted, and he was about to be given the capital punishment. And he was behind the bars and in a solitary confinement, as he was not allowed to meet anybody. Now he was very much disturbed, and also there were a lot of nuisances in the jail authorities doing. There was one more convict, Mr. Premchand. Now one warden, to take out money from his relatives of the Premchand, he was troubling him, and in that anger, what did he do? He put a iron rod in the anus part of the Mr. Premchand, who was a convict, another convict. Now Sunil Batra was so disturbed, he wrote a postcard to the Supreme Court saying, even though we are prisoners, we should not be treated like this, and there should be, though we are prisoners, हम लोग कैदी है, फिर भी हमारा भी कुछ अधिकार है, And it may be we should also have some fundamental basic rights. Now, what Supreme Court said, yes, the committee was appointed, committee was also appointed to check the Premchand, and actually Premchand has suffered. The jail authorities tried to cover that, कुछ नहीं ये तो piles है उसको ऐसे ही लग गया. But the Supreme Court came to the rescue. Now, in this matter, Sunil Batra was not given any relief, except that the meaning of the solitary confinement was defined again here. And what was said that in solitary confinement, he should be kept away from the other prisoners, but he should not be kept out of the eye view of the other prisoners. He may see the other prisoners, but he cannot mingle with them. And for Premchand, he was given the treatment and all that. So this is how even one with postcard, a PIL can be filed. Another case is from the Bihar, that is about the Hussain Ara Khatun case. Now, this is one of the landmark judgment. It was that in Bihar, there were 40,000 women prisoners, and they were like without trial, languishing in jail for a long time. Now, the court was thinking that when there are so many prisoners, women, small children, they were having, if this is the position and they are languishing without trial, so bail should be granted, they should be released on the PR bond. Sometimes we hear that the bail amount is so high that the poor people can't afford. They may not be able to afford even lawyer's fees. In such situation, if the trial does not continue and it takes longer time, they should be granted bail. Hussain Ara Khatun is such judgment, which is the actually the base of the criminal trial, where the accused is kept in a custody without the trial going on. So there are many judgments. I have a separate video on the public interest litigation. Many of the judgments are discussed there. I would request Vandana to put the same in the group later on. Now, next we move with Deepika for today's reading. Deepika, kindly unmute yourself. This is section 9A of the Civil Procedure Code. Understanding jurisdiction, a coat of many colors. Mostly, I do not take up civil, but I would love to all of us, including me, to understand what is section 9. Can you read? Deepika, unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Shall I start?
Yes.
Background. Section 9A was inserted in the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, the code as an amendment specific to the state of Maharashtra by the Code of Civil Procedure Maharashtra Amendment Act 1970, and by way of abundant caution was reintroduced in the code with the Code of Civil Procedure Act 1977. The insertion of Section 9A in the code was guided by peculiar circumstances. That is, at such time, the practice was followed to initiate declaratory suits without giving valid notice to the government under Section 80 of the Code. The plaintiff would undertake to issue such notice and would pray for ad interim injunction. After the expiry of the period for issuance of such notice, the plaintiff would withdraw the suit and file a fresh one, praying for and successfully obtaining fresh ad interim reliefs from the court. The vicious cycle was sought to be avoided by the introduction of Section 9A in the code in 1970. Thereafter, in 2018, the Code of Civil Procedure Maharashtra Amendment Act was notified. The statement of objects and reasons of this amendment inter alia noted that Section 9A was leading to judicial bottlenecks in the form of the application for interim relief being pending, and as a consequence, the interim relief was being continued as final relief in most cases. Further, the orders passed under Section 9A was amenable to their own challenge, leading to a multiplicity of proceedings without any consideration of the matters on merits. Section 9A was accordingly deleted by the above amendment. However, by a second amendment in 2018, it was provided that the proceedings pending under Section 9A on the date of the introduction of the amendment and any preliminary issue framed under Section 9A would be decided at the time of final determination of the other issues framed under Order 14 of the Code, and that any ad interim relief granted under Section 9A may be confirmed, vacated, or modified at the stage of final hearing of the interim application. The judgment in Nusti Navile Vadia versus Ivory Properties. In Nusti Navile Vadia versus Ivory Properties, the correctness of Foreshore Cooperative Housing Society Limited versus Praveen D. Desai was considered to determine the scope of the term jurisdiction of the court in Section 9A of the Code. In foreshore, it had been held that the jurisdiction in Section 9A was wide enough to include the issue of limitation and that the term could not be read in a restricted sense to include only territorial, pecuniary, or subject matter jurisdiction. In order to determine whether the position taken in foreshore was correct in law, the Supreme Court discussed a plethora of judgments passed by the Supreme Court itself, as well as various high courts, to determine whether jurisdiction was an issue of law and fact, whether limitation could be included within the ambit of jurisdiction and the scope of Section 9 with regards to Order 14, Rule 2 of the Code, whether jurisdiction includes limitation in its ambit. Foreshore held that although the plea of limitation was a mixed question of law and fact, Section 9A was a self-contained scheme with a non-obstant clause that mandates the court to follow the provision. Further, it held that the question of limitation was synonymous with jurisdiction, and if the same was raised, it had to be tried as a preliminary issue by the court. In the Nusli Wadia case, during the course of arguments before the Supreme Court, Mr. Fali S. Nariman contended that no issue which was a mixed question of fact and law could be tried as a preliminary issue under the code, and that the plea of limitation is always a mixed question of fact and law, and therefore cannot be decided without reference to the starting point of the limitation period, which will be purely factual. Eventually, in the Nusli Wadia case, it was held that the jurisdiction to entertain in Section 9 could not be understood within the wide ambit that was held in foreshore and had to be interpreted in the narrow sense. The case drew the distinction between jurisdiction and limitation by holding that in the event that the court does not have the jurisdiction to entertain the suit, it means that the court does not have the power to entertain the suit. When a suit is barred by limitation, it means that it is not possible for the court to grant the relief as well as pay for it. While the difference between the two is subtle, the Nusli Wadia case has clarified that the scope of Section 9A is limited to the maintainability and the competence of the court to receive the suit for adjudication. Jurisdiction under Section 9, Order 14, Rule 2. Order 14, Rule 2, which was amended in 1977, mandates that the court has to pronounce judgment on all issues, and sub-rule states that the court may try the issue of jurisdiction of the court or a bar to the suit created by an law before the settlement of other issues only if the preliminary issues are based on. While the Supreme Court in the Nusli Wadia case held that Section 9A was not repugnant to Order 14, Rule 2, it also clarified that the scope of Section 9A was limited as compared to the same of Order 14, Rule 2. Pertinently, it held that the jurisdiction to entertain can be contemplated under Section 9A only if it is a pure question of law and not a question of law and fact. It also emphasized that no evidence can be recorded to decide the preliminary issue of jurisdiction under Section 9A of the Code, as the Court does not contemplate to full-fledged trials being held to decide preliminary issues as well as the other issues. By holding the above, the Supreme Court has effectively reconciled Section 9A of the Code with Order 14, Rule 2. Consequently, while jurisdiction may be tried as a preliminary issue for all the remaining cases under Section 9A, the court will also have to adhere to the principles of Order 14, Rule 2. In other words, only issues of law can be treated as preliminary issues. Jurisdiction under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. Order 14, Rule 2, which was amended in 1977, mandates that the court has to pronounce judgments on all issues. Ma'am, should I read it again? I've already read it.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
You read the arbitration, you have not read.
No, not this one. Yes. Jurisdiction under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. While the Nusli-Wadia case did not specifically deal with the scope of jurisdiction in arbitration proceedings, the judgment in Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative Limited versus Bhadra Products has been referred to in the judgment. The Indian Farmers case was referred to in order to understand the meaning of jurisdiction in different legislation and the interpretation of the same in case law. In the Indian farmers case, it was observed that limitation did not fall under the ambit of jurisdiction under Section 16 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, and accordingly held that when a jurisdictional challenge is upheld, it has an appealable order under Section 37 of the Arbitration Act. While the Indian farmers case sought to clarify the scope of the jurisdiction in arbitration proceedings, since the Nusli Wadia case has not opined on it, it is probable that the judgment in the Nusli Wadia case will have an effect on the interpretation of the term in the future. Conclusion. With the repeal of Section 9A applicable to the state of Maharashtra, there has been certainly ambiguity regarding the treatment of the cases in which issues were formed under Section 9A before the repeal. However, the judgment in the Nusli Wadia case has clarified not only the interpretation of the term jurisdiction in Section 9, but also the context in which it has to be read. While the term jurisdiction has been mentioned in the court in several places, as the title of his article suggests, each occurrence of the term is a different color, a different meaning. Since Section 9A refers to the jurisdiction of the court to entertain such a suit, it is clear that the court should have the inherent jurisdiction to receive the suit in order to consider the merits of the same. The court has indicated that jurisdiction under Section 9A will be limited to territorial, pecuniary, and subject matter jurisdiction and can be treated as a preliminary issue only when it may be resolved solely based on law and admitted facts. The judgment in the Nusli Wadia case may have helped to clarify the position of law in the cases that are still under the old regime of Section 9A. However, challenges to the 2018 amendment, especially the sunset clause, continued to be heard in the High Court of Bombay and have been referred to a larger bench.
Thank you so much, Deepika. Two, three things I would like to point out. It is not easy to understand. It's a civil piece of article. I would request all of you to read section 80. The practice was followed to initiate declare suits without giving valid notice to the government under section 80 of the code. This is very important. And section 9A is referred to as larger bench. But then this is also something very important because we may not be practicing only in Maharashtra, we may be practicing elsewhere also. So CPC is a very vast subject. It's not easy to understand just one go. I wouldn't say the criminal matters are really easy. They have their own risk and also own challenges. But civil matter is actually very exhaustive, and I need to understand the civil matter, and the area of the civil is so vast that it cannot be confined to one or two or three acts. Like whenever we are having criminal matters, we can read Indian Evidence Act, Criminal Procedure Code, and the Indian Penal Code or the Concern Act if it is a negotiable instrument act. But in CPC, the area of the study is very vast. So those who are in the beginning of the career, I would request that if you get any civil lawyer, try to practice with him or her for at least 2-3 years. You'll have a good idea about civil matters also, the basic ideas. Okay, then we move to another very important aspect of the Indian Evidence Act, that is the primary evidence and secondary evidence. Very easy to understand. The primary evidence means the document itself produced for the inspection of the court. That is under section 62 of the Indian Evidence Act. This is simple. If you have any document, birth certificate, marriage certificate, go and produce before the court. It can be exhibited easily. It can be accepted because it is issued by the government and it is the original document. But what happens when original document is not available with you? That is called secondary evidence, means and include. Certified copies given under the provisions hereinafter contain copies made from the original by mechanical process, which in themselves ensure the accuracy of the copy, and copies compared with such copy. It may be notarized copy, copies made from or compared with the original, counterparts of the documents as against the parties who did not execute them, oral accounts of the contents of a document given by some person who has himself seen it. Now see, when you read 62 and 63, it is not easy to understand because 63 is a very wide subject, and it is very helpful in civil matters as well as criminal matters. You may have a client who is saying, I had this document, now I don't have, I just have the copy. Now I'll say, we'll take one example of the a flat. A sold it to B. Now the original agreement is in the possession of the A, and he has sold it to B. B has paid the money, but he is not giving the agreement. The original agreement is in the possession of the A. Now, but he has the copy. So he can come before the court by filing the copy that he has been cheated by A, and this is the copy. Now, this is not a primary document, this is secondary document. But he has to satisfy the court that the original document is in the possession of the A, and he is not ready to produce it before the court. So this is how you can bring out the secondary evidence. Also, there is a possibility that there are certified copies, there are notarized copy, and original is somewhere else. When you cannot produce the original and you can convince the court what is the reason that you are unable to bring the original copy before the court, then the court will allow the secondary evidence production of the secondary evidence by way of an application. So you have to make an application, and this application has to be I would say, actually to the point. You cannot write 100 things. It should be very to the point and apt, and it should come out with the clarity, the reason why you are not able to produce the original or original in whose possession. So it is very important that you take out. I can give one more example where there is a heavy rain and your original documents are not found, or they are so misplaced that you cannot produce before the court. In those situations also you can produce the copies, but then you have to satisfy the court, this is the reason they are not available with me, and that is the reason I am producing the copy of the originals. So it has to be in the form where we can convince the court that it is not available with us. But this convincing court is difficult because the other side lawyer will always take an objection for producing the secondary evidence. So secondary evidence is a subject which you have to deal, whether you are doing civil case or the matrimonial dispute or possibly a criminal case. You have to produce these documents at some stages at the trial to prove the innocence of your client, or to prove your client's case in civil matters or in matrimonial dispute, to prove the case properly, to bring out the document, to show the conduct, maybe a birth certificate, maybe a marriage certificate. So these are very important sections of the Indian Penal Code. So this was all about today. We have about 8 minutes more. Anybody having any questions, we can take up.